Author: Vyacheslav Nikolaev. Wizards of Distant Worlds. The Chronicles of Azarala. Chapter 3. When Reality Thins. The silvery mist swirled around the chronometer tower like a living creature, sometimes contracting, sometimes spreading across the ancient stones. Alira stood by the window, gazing at the intricate dance of time streams. After the events in the neighboring universe of Aurea, she couldn't shake a strange feeling, as if the fabric of reality itself had begun to thin. The massive clock on the wall was striking midnight when someone knocked on her door. 3 quick knocks, a pause, then one more, the special code of the Council of Keepers of her world. "Enter," she said, already knowing that news couldn't be good at such an hour. Keeper Corvin appeared on the threshold with 2 companions in robes. Corvin's usually impeccable robe was wrinkled, and concern was evident in his eyes. "We've discovered an anomaly," he said without preamble. "Someone is trying to change the course of history in our universe, Astralia." "Who are these 2 people with you?" "I've never seen them before," said Alira. Corvin introduced his companions, Veleslav and Vidomir, explaining that they were residents of the homeland of humanity. Alira, recalling ancient texts, exclaimed in admiration, "They're from Azarala. Are you gods?" Vidomir laughed, remembering his past self. "You can consider us senior keepers." "The Creator is one," said Veleslav. Alira looked at them and couldn't understand anything these strange people were saying. The development of her world, Divnagori, was still in its early stages. "But what's happening with our universe?" "I sense something's wrong," said Alira. "It's the Tenebrians stirring up trouble, wanting to reverse the development of your universe," said Veleslav. "They want to create something similar to the former world of Antiano, where the Darkers turned multiple dimensions and worlds into a single world," added Vidomir. "That's frightening," said Alira. "The Sridom dimension might cease to exist. It's the most beautiful place I know. Beyond the Sridom dimension, we're not allowed by the senior Supreme Keepers. Why don't you let us pass? Those who tried to go further without permission are returned to the first dimension with rebirth and without memory. And those who stay in the Sridom dimension for too long lose their memory. They're also returned to the first dimension." "I see you have a kind heart, and you can be told the truth," said Veleslav, then continued. "I'll explain in simple terms so you can understand. You're not allowed beyond the Sridom dimension for your own safety. All beings of the lower universes are infected with an evil disease, and this evil perishes above the Sridom dimension. And along with this evil, you might perish too. Evil is very strongly attached to you. And you cannot stay in the Sridom dimension for too long, especially those who are heavily infected with evil. Evil feels uncomfortable there and tries to return to the lower dimensions. It's what erases memory and creates discomfort for people." Then Vidomir continued, "Evil feeds on malevolent emotions. Until you learn to control them, they won't let go." "But how should one react to evil done to them?" asked Alira. Vidomir replied, "Veleslav and I were in the same position. In fact, all people once came from Azarala. And there is no malice or hatred there. The villain created these imperfect universes, including yours, and people fell into a trap, becoming infected with evil here. Know that when you fight someone, you're fighting your loved ones, only at the moment their sick mind is clouded by evil. And those with a sick mind need to be stopped so they don't harm others, but don't regard them with hatred, but with benefit, to reduce the evil in their hearts. People don't remember Azarala. Evil doesn't let them remember. But you can remember. Don't feed the evil, and it will weaken, and goodness will replace it." Alira said, "People of our world won't understand this. The only thing I can say is to fight against your own evil within your heart. And then you can be freed and return home. People are more attracted to magic. They want to use it to live carefree lives." Veleslav said, "In reality, magic doesn't exist. In fact, we know more laws of the mega-universe. And the laws are written by the Creator in the spiritual light from which the mega-universe is woven. And we, wizards, have simply learned to follow more laws. And the laws of the mega-universe cannot be broken, only adapted to. Soon we'll be able to save all people and return everyone home, and all universes will be healed from the density of matter. And thanks to you and those people from other universes who develop protection against evil. By taking a strand of hair from each, we can concoct an elixir. But what has happened to us? Why is the fabric of reality thinning in our world? Asked Alira. It's the Tenebrians wanting to break through here, said Vidomir. Tenebrians? Alira mused thoughtfully. I've only heard of them in ancient legends. They say they feed on time itself. Corvin nodded grimly. The legends don't lie. Tenebrians are beings from the universe of Aurea. They cannot exist in full-fledged realities, so they need to merge all dimensions and worlds into one world to make it suitable for their existence. And what will happen to the inhabitants of Astralia? Asked Alira, though she already guessed the answer. They will dissolve into the void, replied Veleslav. Their energy will become food for the Tenebrians. Vidomir took a strange device from the folds of his robe, resembling a compass, but with several needles moving independently of each other. Look, he pointed to one of the needles, trembling and darting around the circle. The epicenter of the thinning is in the epic rift, at the foot of the Crystal Mountains. The ancient Temple of Time is located there, exclaimed Alira. It houses the Chronograph, an artifact that maintains the stability of time flow in our universe. That's exactly what they're trying to destroy, nodded Veleslav. We need to hurry. The four keepers left the tower and headed to the stables where rare creatures were kept, temporalias, capable of moving through time streams. These majestic beings, resembling huge falcons with feathers the color of the starry sky, could cover great distances almost instantly. As they approached the epic rift, a terrifying sight unfolded before their eyes. The sky above the Temple of Time had parted like a curtain, revealing a pulsating blackness from which Tenebrians were emerging. They're already here, whispered Alira. But they haven't reached the chronograph yet, Vidomir said confidently. Otherwise, we would already feel the destruction of the time stream. Corvin pointed to the warping space around the temple. We can't go directly. The Tenebrians have created a time barrier. We have an advantage, said Veleslav, pulling a pulsating crystal from his pocket. In Azarala, we developed time synchronization technology. This will allow us to create a time pocket, a space where time flows differently than outside. He handed the crystal to Alira. You must activate the device here. Alira took the crystal, and as soon as her fingers touched it, it glowed with a bright light. A shimmering sphere formed around the four keepers. Now we have a chance, said Vidomir. For the Tenebrians, we'll be moving so fast they won't have time to react. They headed to the temple, moving through the distorted space. Everything looked normal to them, but outside their time pocket, they would be mere blurred silhouettes moving at incredible speed. Inside the temple, they saw a group of Tenebrians, tall, thin beings dressed like darkers in black robes with hoods, whose bodies seemed to consist of concentrated darkness. They surrounded the central altar, where the chronograph pulsated, an ancient mechanism resembling a complex astronomical clock, where each gear and pendulum represented different aspects of time. They're trying to reconfigure the chronograph, Corvin said quietly. If they succeed, time in Astralia will accelerate to such a degree that the entire universe will age in an instant. Do we have a plan? Asked Alira, gripping her keeper wizard staff. Veleslav nodded. Tenebrians can manipulate time, but they have a vulnerability. They exist simultaneously in several dimensions, which gives them strength, but also makes them vulnerable to a time paradox. What's required of us? Asked Corvin. Vidomir and I will create a convergence point of timelines, Veleslav answered. And you and Alira must reconfigure the chronograph to create a time loop. A time loop? Alira repeated. But that will disrupt the stability of the entire universe. Not exactly, Vidomir smiled. The loop will be isolated. It will capture only the Tenebrians and send them into an endless cycle of the same moment in time. They will be trapped in it, unable to move either forward or backward. The plan was risky, but there was no other way out. Veleslav and Vidomir took positions on opposite sides of the hall and began reciting ancient spells in the language of Azarala. The air between them thickened, and visible time streams appeared, silvery threads connecting in the center of the hall. Meanwhile, Alira and Corvin stealthily approached the chronograph. Using their knowledge and powers as keepers, they began making subtle changes to the mechanism settings. The Tenebrians, absorbed in their work, didn't immediately notice the keeper's presence. But when the convergence point of timelines began to form, they turned around. Their faces contorted in a silent scream. "Faster!" shouted Veleslav. "We can't maintain the convergence point for long." Alira turned the last disc on the chronograph, and the mechanism emitted a deep, resonating sound. The pendulums and gears began moving in strange, illogical sequences. In the center of the hall, where the timelines converged, a glowing sphere formed. It began to expand, capturing the Tenebrians one by one. The beings tried to flee, but their movements became slower and slower, as if they were freezing in time. "It's working!" exclaimed Corvin. But at that moment, one of the Tenebrians, larger and apparently stronger than the others, lunged at the chronograph. He extended his dark hands toward the heart of the mechanism. Without hesitation, Alira stood between the Tenebrian and the chronograph. She raised her staff, and a beam of bright light burst from it. The Tenebrian recoiled, but didn't retreat. "The light of Azarala," shouted Vidomir. "Use the light of Azarala." Veleslav took a small crystal from the folds of his robe, glowing with pure, white light. He threw it to Alira, and she caught the crystal, which immediately merged with her staff. The staff shone even brighter, and Alira directed it at the Tenebrian. The beam of light pierced the dark entity, and the being began to disintegrate into particles of darkness, which were drawn into the time loop. The last Tenebrian disappeared into the glowing sphere, which then compressed to the size of a crystal and hovered in the air. "What now?" asked Alira, breathing heavily. Veleslav carefully approached the crystal and enclosed it in a special container. "This crystal contains a time loop with the Tenebrians inside. We'll give it to the Ethereans in the universe of Aurea. They'll send them to the 10th dimension for correction." After all, the Tenebrians were once humans too. Evil made them this way. They didn't resist it well. Vidomir approached the chronograph and examined it closely. "The mechanism is damaged, but not critically. We can restore it." "And what about the tear in the fabric of reality?" asked Corvin, pointing to the dark rift still visible in the sky. "Now that the Tenebrians are captured, the rift will start to close," replied Veleslav. "But this process needs to be accelerated." Alira nodded. "I know a restoration ritual, but I'll need the help of all wizards and keepers of Astralia. And we'll provide a lot of Azarala's energy," said Vidomir. "Together we'll manage." Over the next few days, the wizards and keepers of Astralia, led by Alira, Corvin, Veleslav, and Vidomir, conducted a complex ritual to restore the fabric of reality. They combined their forces, directing them towards healing the universe. Gradually, the dark rift in the sky began to close, and the thinned areas of reality began to condense. The chronograph was restored and once again regulated the flow of time in Astralia. When the work was completed, Veleslav and Vidomir prepared to return to Azarala. "You will always be welcome guests in our world," said Alira, bidding them farewell. "And you, Alira," replied Veleslav, "will someday visit Azarala. You're almost ready. Your heart is almost free from darkness." "And remember," added Vidomir, "protection from evil isn't in denying its existence, but in understanding its nature and choosing light despite the darkness around." They gave Alira and Corvin communication crystals. With their help, the keepers of Astralia could contact Azarala in case of new danger. Veleslav and Vidomir created a portal and, waving goodbye, disappeared in a radiance of light. Alira looked at the sky where the rift had been, and now stars were shining. "We won today," she said to Corvin. "But I feel this is just the beginning of a long journey." "A journey home?" he asked. "A journey home," she nodded. "To Azarala."
тоже видим в мире тьмы. Истину находим, капля света в серых глазах. Нет пути назад в этих краях, но где-то вдали слышен зов. Огонь в сердцах пробудим вновь. Не дадим темным силам царить, наши миры будем живыми творить. Темные силы в наших сердцах, каждый шаг в их руках. Где же свет?